I've mentioned here challenges and opportunities because I think it's certainly not a straightforward issue. So to talk about it, I was hoping to talk firstly about what we mean by smart cities, because it is a term that's used very widely. And I'm sure we all have our own ideas in this audience of people with expertise at so many levels to what we mean by smart cities. But also I'm interested in the way that phrase is so often used without consideration of what it might actually mean. I want to talk a little bit about current trends in national and city policy, and that's certainly Jago's area, but I'll talk particularly to Jago and my work in recent activities looking at this across various cities in Southeast Asia and elsewhere for Vietnam national cities policy in particular, where we've been doing some work with our colleagues at RMIT in Vietnam, where we have a campus. I wanted to talk a little bit about data-led urban analysis and policy, some examples of what that might look like, how we might start to use smart cities data and information to try and make better decisions about city sustainability issues. And I know that's what some of the speakers coming ahead of me will be talking to as well in a much more specific sense. But also the idea of beyond smart cities to think about what makes cities sustainable and inclusive, and how the use of various city analytics and data technologies might make that happen, or in fact might work against that happening. So I'll talk to some examples and plans, both from Australia and Vietnam as examples, rather than Indonesia, which I'll leave to the others here today. So that's a bit of an overview of what I want to do in the next half hour. And of course, I'm very happy to have questions at the end of the session, but if there's a particular point of clarification, please put it in the chat. I might not see it till I finish the presentation. So what do we mean by smart city examples? I think there's sort of categories of smart cities, and there's some readings at the end I've got here, and I'm happy to share these slides so people can look at those. But the most obvious ones are this sort of operationalizing data. The availability of data is so much greater than it's been in the past in terms of digital data that's often generated by community members, generated by business, generated by government, and thinking about ways to operationalize that in urban planning. And the most evident ones being things like, we use them often every day, thinking about traffic modelling, thinking about real-time traffic forecasting and predictive traffic management, for example. We see the same thing around energy, around simple trends in where people are going on a daily basis, whether it's retailing data generated by reviews or all sorts of data that we have so handy on our phones, in our pockets, in forms we never had before. Now, of course, much of that is proprietary, and scraping that data and thinking about ways to use it for urban planning is challenging. But that's the sort of top level of, I think, what many people think when they think about smart cities. They think about that notion of the ubiquity of data and the ways, in fact, we can use it to make decisions. Now, a lot of that's a lot like past planning models of thinking about ways to collect data, collate it, and come up with optimal decisions. I think smart cities data, despite the fact there's so much data now, we still hit the same challenges of how do we actually optimize decisions just because we know these things. Do we know what people want to do, or simply what they're forced to do under current circumstances, for example? The second broad category of smart cities, ways I suppose we can think about it, is digitising urban management and digitising the interactions between government and community. And the evident ways we can see that in city management is taking forms of government community relationships, whether it's transactional relationships or other forms, into a digital realm. So that might be about the way we engage with government, or it simply might be about the way we do regular daily things, interacting around particular forms of discussion, debate, transactions, and the like. And so that's one that really does rely on a sense that we've got a digitally literate and digitally able community to engage with, as well as, of course, the government and bureaucratic challenges that arise because of that. So there's digital literacy and infrastructure at both ends of that story, or that category of smart cities. The third category of smart cities that's often talked about is a much more traditional economic development model, which is one where we talk about community and economic well-being being generated through technologies. A sense that if we had a technological fix, we'll have better decision-making, better community access, better economies, of course, a 21st century economy, if you like, moving into that sense of decision-making as well as categories of knowing about the city that will make things better. And I'll talk to a couple of examples about that later, which is thinking about technologies to talk about how to revitalise spaces, how to think about human health in the city, thinking about classic health indicators around air quality or walkability or shade and thermal comfort. Examples such as those are often used. The fourth one is that sense of thinking through the smart city as a place where people are well-versed, connected, and innovative in new technologies. Thinking about the possibilities of new economies and whether the capacity exists within the workforce and within the civic infrastructure to enable that, which of course leads to the fifth one, which is a broad category of when we talk about the smart city, which from an urban planning perspective is the spatial strategies that enable a new economy to form. And that new economy is often around the idea of particular precincts, civic institutions such as universities, private institutions, finance arrangements that make those places operate. And certainly through the 21st century, we see many examples of those things. And I can think of a number in Indonesia or classically somewhere like Cyberjaya in Kuala Lumpur, attempts to actually spatially agglomerate particular new economies around research and development, universities, local startup corporations or multinational large-scale corporations, and their agglomeration in place as a spatial strategy. So, of course, this raises a set of questions for us if we think about smart cities. What's it say about inclusiveness if we're thinking about who can and who can't access these things? What does it mean about sustainability? Often there's a sense that there's a presumption that sustainability flows from many of these technologies because of their efficiencies. But I'd argue that's not always the case, and we need to think through that in a very careful way. And of course, we think about what effective city strategy and policy is to enable these things. What do we do to enable them? How do we deal with the challenges of governance to actually enable them to occur in an effective way? And of course, I thought about these in terms of just some simple concepts underpinning the UN Sustainable Development Goals, for example. We can see that notion of sustainable cities and economic growth being linked to things like health, reduced inequalities, but also education. And I can see how smart cities logics and the aim of smart cities policy usually tries to talk about all these things: nature, inequality, economic growth, access to education, and the sustainability of cities, as well as others. And there's certainly a lot to offer from the way new technologies integrate with community life and economic life, but there's also some big barriers to making it happen. Now, I wanted to talk a little bit just off the back of that to some of the ideas of what it is that we were talking about national and city strategies for urban development. This is from the United Nations Habitat Guidelines for national strategies for urban development, which I think matters in this regard because it points to the intentions of urban strategies in the 21st century, which fits in some of the discussions we're having later, which is how things happen very locally, how things happen at a large scale, and how people engage with those things. And of course, how do we deliver that down from a national strategy through to local city strategies in a way which actually makes sense in cities and allows them to have the foundations for thinking about how digital technologies will actually benefit them rather than simply become another element of unequal development within and across the city. Now, the UN Habitat Guidelines, which my colleague, Professor Dodson, was involved in developing, talk about national urban policy, which has clear goals and objectives, has a spatial integration perspective. It talks about places within the city, not simply cities as an abstract thing, but rather places that have neighbourhoods, communities, differences between them. It's very firmly talking to institutional arrangements, and I'll talk about that in a minute, because part of the challenge of institutional arrangements within an era of, if you like, digitization and smart cities is the relationship between civic society, government, and private sector, and they can be quite challenging relationships to actually result in equitable and sustainable cities. It's of course about the commitment of resources and how we engage with communities and other stakeholders. And so the idea that national urban strategies therefore talk to economic development and the structure, the morphology of cities, but also to human development and sustainability and climate resilience is really important here. These are not simply policies which talk about economic growth and where we put things to make that happen. And I think that's very important to consider in terms of when we're discussing any of these sorts of policies, to think through what a city policy might be if it's able to achieve the sorts of things we want to do. The OECD has sort of principles for national urban policy as well, which is about thinking about potential cities, the potential of cities in all sizes. And so we're talking here about cities that are high growth, like the Jakarta region, high and large scale, as well as many smaller second tier cities, which often hold really huge potential for adopting new technologies, perhaps even more so than some of the larger cities in the region. They talk about the idea in thinking about where people live and work, thinking about what sort of places do people circulate within and inhabit over the daytime and across the city. They, of course, talk to an issue that's very close to my heart, and I mentioned to Dafa before that I was in Georgia a couple of weeks ago looking at the relationship between urban and rural areas. The sense that when we talk about city policy, we can't ignore the interdependencies and relationships between the city, nature within the city, and rural areas outside of the city. And it's a fundamental and important part of urban policy. I think would think too, that there's a sense that we've got a future-orientated policy, and that is challenging when in so many cities around the world, including my own, catching up on the failures of past policy is a political priority, and future orientation becomes quite hard to achieve, particularly within political cycles where certain objectives can easily be lost and reshaped within a few years. So if you look at this whole list, you'll start to see that there's a set of principles which speak to the very things that we're all interested in. And for most of the idea of smart cities, and particularly smart and sustainable cities, there's challenges here which are around who gets involved and gets to have a say, whether we can do this across all the sorts of city scales that we see, and how do we do it in a way which both achieves the economic growth and opportunities for innovation that we want, but also doesn't leave people excluded from that process. Now, I thought I'd just quickly point to the fact that, we've got some good examples of national urban policy across the Southeast Asia region, across higher income countries in Europe and the like. This is not a new thing to do, and it's something which I just want to speak to the idea that, in fact, having a cohesive national urban policy and filtering that down to how it fits and makes change in different sorts of cities of different size is really important. But in that same sense, cities are different too. And within Indonesia, as you all know, the scale and the set of problems that for different cities have can be quite remarkably different. So the underlying principles, I suppose, are these ones that hold true and have held true for a long time. The sense that agglomeration economies, the efficiencies of having lots of things in one place, has always been the efficiency of the city. In a digital era, it seems like many of those things don't always hold true in the same way. But sharing infrastructure, having specialist knowledge and innovation still is a driving force of what makes cities achieve the sorts of innovation and change that we want. But they suffer negative externalities, and we know those and we live them. Waste, heat, congestion, things like housing prices that show a mismatch between supply and demand, concentrating risk exposure. That's a good one. We saw that in the pandemic. We see it when disasters strike, that there becomes greater degrees of vulnerability driven by growth. And so those natural things that make cities great places also present risks for them. And so from a national urban policy point of view and a local urban policy point of view, they become the big challenges to overcome, to both have the growth that generates the innovation and also address the negative externalities. And so technologies that allow us to understand the city better create great potential in that regard. But we've got to think carefully about how they actually work. Those diseconomies of scale, the negative outcomes of growth are often best reduced through having good governance, which we all know, thinking about technical competency, but in analysis, and that's often a government task, but also thinking about technical competency to use the data we have and the emergent data that all sorts of new technologies are creating constantly for us in decision-making, in data collection, in incidental collection of data that we never knew we had before. There's those issues of financing. How do we finance new infrastructure? And how do we make choices about that new infrastructure? And there's also those attention to spatial structure, thinking about the fact that the city is not a flat, singular place, but rather it's a place of difference across it. And so there we think about the long-term and transparent metropolitan spatial plans, which I think is part of what we need to get to here. We need to talk about the way that cities around the world are making long-term plans, keeping those long-term plans cohesive. And of course, the great example in Indonesia is that of the new capital, what to do with Jakarta in the long run, all of those sorts of challenges, which even, as you all know, aren't always consistently applied and consistently thought of as things change, despite the fact that's a long-term goal. It comes with its own challenges, the cycles of politics too. We see that though this concept of thinking in the long term is essential, but thinking in the long term is also really dangerous unless we look at ways to actually accommodate unknown change, resilience, accommodate innovation, and try and conceptualize planning for uncertainty in particular ways, which is a politically difficult thing to do. I'll talk to some of that in a minute. But if we think about some trends in metropolitan planning right now that actually allow long-term planning, but also resilience and flexibility, the obvious ones are how we think about urban development around transportation, how we think about using nature as solutions. I've got an example down here of thinking about, turning an urban freeway back into a water and green and blue public space. Thinking about smart city strategies, which I'll talk to in a minute. Thinking about ways to use the data we have and the ways we have digitized, whether it's information or decision making or engagement with people in different ways. And of course, also thinking about what to do with redundant and old spaces, how we redevelop them, how we think differently about them, how we move from them, how we reuse them. They're all considerable trends we're seeing across the world, which are orientating themselves towards long-term planning, but also doing so with a constant focus on resilience and change, engaging with people, and addressing the fact that there's many things we don't know about innovation, change, and economic change. So in metropolitan governance, that usually means we've got to think about things like accountability and decision-making, the development of coordinated spatial processes for urban growth, but also thinking about urban taxation that creates investment and what urban investment looks like that isn't so decisive that it actually rules out other possibilities. Thinking about urban investment that actually encourages investment from across different sectors, not just government. And of course, having relationships within governments that we see across the world as being important, relationships between different hierarchies of government. that are orientated towards the same outcomes. So, public finance and development finance is a really significant challenge for many cities right now and continues to be. And we think about the sort of shifts in how people have looked at accessing finance whether through taxation, looking at ways to focus clearly on users rather than on everybody, looking at opportunities to actually capture the benefits of particular investment more effectively for those who are going to benefit the most from it, and then thinking about ways to redistribute that in other ways. And also looking at mechanisms of more mechanisms of accessing private capital. So there's obviously borrowing and bonds and the like, but of course, we see, and we've seen in many cities, using public-private partnerships to create infrastructure investments, but also that idea, as I said, of value capture, thinking about how do you actually take strategic interventions, recognise who will benefit from them, and trying to extract that benefit in some form to redistribute back out, either to the people who will be affected by it or to others to think about future models of redeveloping the same. So that's, I suppose, an overview on how we think about models of urban governance and models of urban finance. But I wanted to come back to smart cities for a moment and think about the idea of, well, what's so special about smart cities in this regard? Well, how is that any different to other eras of urban data management, of urban governance, of urban economies? Well, of course, the opportunities of particularly the last 20 years or 25 years of how data is used, how we interact between each other and with government, how we understand what's going on around us in very fine-grained detail as planners has been considerable. We haven't always mobilised ourselves to make the most of that data, but it does present us with really significant opportunities. But of course, that's not an inherently sustainable city. Just because we've got lots of information and we can make efficient choices, for example, and it's not necessarily inclusive, particularly if we gear the way we do business as planners within government only around those digital relationships and those Industry 4.0 focus. So I'll make the point here that the smart city is not inherently sustainable. And the obvious one is about data use and energy and what sort of growth and motivations it drives. And we know that, I mean, even the simple one of energy used by digital transactions and internet traffic is considerable. We also risk the idea that we're simply digitising business as usual cities, which is the idea that the city is still doing the same thing. We've just got some digital technologies to allow it, and that's still it's not necessarily going to make traffic more, reduce traffic or make people shift modes or make trips shorter or any of those things. It might simply digitise the information that allows us to continue to doing the things we're doing. It might not include nature. And so the idea of the smart city as one that tries to think about the city beyond humans is, of course, a really important one, but it's certainly not evident that that's the way that smart city policy operates and thinks about the problems and solutions. And equally, the smart city is non-inherently inclusive. The most obvious one being about digital literacies and a digital divide. Who has access to new forms of transaction? Who has access to new forms of relationship with government or business? For example, who's got infrastructure to support that? Who's got education to support that? And there's age issues in that. There's obviously issues around access to education, access to data. There's also that idea of spatial remodelling, if you like. We talked about before, having spatial strategies to support new economic formations. But if the smart city economy actually spatially remodels out some people, it creates new hubs for industry, new hubs for knowledge economies that exclude others, then I think there's something challenging about that model of the city, which is to remodel and reuse spaces and discard communities that have actually been there previously. And of course, the most fundamental one that we can all be concerned about, but are equally, I suppose, circumspect about what that actually means, is data as a service versus data as surveillance. And, for people who are old enough to remember before everyone signed up to anything without thinking about it, you start to wonder whether people are actually concerned too much about that. People are usually quite willing to sign away their rights to a corporation to have access to an app pretty easily. And so we can start to think about what that means, data as service, data as surveillance, when they merge together, what people are willing to give in order to be provided with a service that's helpful to them. They're not easy decisions to make from an ethical standpoint, but we can see what sort of choices people often make or are made for them. So I wanted to talk about, in my last couple of minutes, just talk about a couple of examples of what we might see as, I suppose, attempts to use smart cities infrastructure thinking models in some examples of research that I've been involved with, and policy development ideas that have emanated from those things. And the first thing was thinking through smart city models to analyse and develop policy around urban greening and urban health indicators in Melbourne. So that's some work I've been involved with in various forms, which is around cities and health, cities and social infrastructure, cities and climate resilience through access to, I suppose, managing heat in particular, managing heat stress in the city, and other forms of climate resilience in a city. Now, I mean, I don't know how many people here are familiar with Melbourne, but it's a different climate to yours, but it's certainly one that gets hot. We have a lot of days of hot, dry weather, which is quite different to your own experience. But hot, dry weather and many, many days where the temperature will be above, for example, 40 degrees. And that creates some significant challenges for particular communities that are often more heat stressed than others. The city's uneven in terms of access to the coolness of vegetation, the coolness of access to water, and there's many places that are economically disadvantaged, which are also disadvantaged in that regard. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about that, but also how it might lead to policy. And here's a map which shows us an issue which is of interest in a city like Melbourne. So central Melbourne's here. The green areas are those which are remarkably more walkable in terms of accessing facilities, having access to open space, having access to safe walkable paths and the like. And the pink areas are those which are much less. And so here's a city where inner urban areas have a better quality of the public realm within their neighbourhoods than those in outer suburban areas that have much poorer access and quality of access to the public realm. In particular, it's talking about public realm access, streets, streetscapes, walkable sidewalks, publicly accessible parks and the like that are seen to be part of neighbourhood access to those things. Now, of course, it's very contextual. We've done this work before on walkability as an indicator of I suppose, neighbourhood quality, but it's not obviously the only one. This is a heat vulnerability map of a similar area to the north, showing those areas that are most heat vulnerable. In fact, match up pretty well with some of those that northern area, match up pretty well with some of those areas of the poorer walkability and the like. So places where there's poorer access, particularly to urban tree canopy, particularly public realm urban tree canopy and the like, is going to reduce heat vulnerability in particular areas of long heat waves, and heat waves which we know significantly increase mortality in the community, particularly for older people. So this sort of data, which is accessible through various forms of street scale data. I've done some of this work simply by scraping Google Street View, for example, as well as remote sense data, does lead into policy. We can think about some work we've done before looking at policy briefs that actually are intended to lead to different targets for how we develop cities. And in the case of Melbourne, we have precinct structure guidelines which demand particular forms of access to walkable neighbourhoods to access to green spaces and the like. Now, of course, these are guidelines for new developments that don't always come to pass in reality, unfortunately. As many people know, there's often an implementation gap between policy guidelines, targets, and what occurs on the ground, particularly what occurs some years after new areas are redeveloped or developed on the urban fringe or in inner urban areas, leaving many of those urban fringe areas still poorly serviced in regards to many of the things we're seeking. But it's an example I want to talk to around research that uses data from various forms and leads to policy targets. Now, of course, it's very contextual. This is also some work that our research centre has done in Bangkok, as an example, where many of the issues of interest were quite different. And of course, one issue which isn't as strong a concern in Melbourne, which is around air quality, well, certainly transport-generated air quality. We have air quality concerns often driven by wildfires, but we don't have the same levels of air quality concerns around traffic that I know you would have in Jakarta for the people there and other Indonesian cities, and certainly a city like Bangkok. So trying to then extract what sort of data can give us some critical indicators at different levels is a very contextual thing. And it matters a lot that we understand the city we're working with, and we talk to communities about the data that's generated and how well it actually presents ways to understand the policy problems and potential policy solutions that they have. The second one I wanted to talk a little bit briefly to is just digital transformation in Ho Chi Minh City. So I've been involved in some projects looking at smart cities policy and digitalisation in Vietnam as part of our RMIT Vietnam Smart and Sustainable Cities Research Hub. And here the main challenges are around, and I know there's similar ones in Indonesia, around digital transformation in government. That's one level. How do we transform government so it has digital transactions and relationships with communities? How do they embed new industries, what we might call Industry 4.0, I suppose leading edge tech industries into economic and spatial policy. So that's around where they occur and how do they bring them in to the economy, and dealing with digital literacy and the digital divide, particularly dealing with access, infrastructure access, and digital literacy across all age groups. And then, of course, they're very interested in smart cities technologies for solving basic urban problems, like the ones I described about what makes somewhere more climate resilient when we understand something about flooding, for example. But also, how do we do things like model traffic need and change in a city like Ho Chi Minh City that's growing rapidly, seeing a transition from motorcycle traffic, for example, to motor car traffic, which I know is a challenge in cities like Jakarta too, which is changing the nature of the transport problem. Now, they've got 3 pillars in the national strategy there, which is that digital society, which is really about making people willing and able to be connected, how digital government operates, so how government is using these technologies in its relationships and research, and of course, how do you transform the economy, the urban economy in particular, to those new infrastructure. Each of these dimensions has spatial outcomes for the city. Each of these dimensions occurs differently in different places, in different communities and at different levels of wealth and livelihood access. Vietnam's, of course, this is from work from Oxford Insights recently, but Vietnam sits, at level but below Indonesia in this regard, in their sort of readiness for something like AI to be in decision making. Just as an example, to sort of suggest that I'm not presenting Vietnam as being a leader in these things, rather thinking about what their approaches are to trying to think through making the city smart, if you like, and how they would categorize those things. I'd note that Ho Chi Minh City doesn't talk a lot about nature. It doesn't talk a lot about problems like flood and other climate problems other than what they challenge in terms of housing and urban development. But they do have a series of projects going on, and I'll talk to the ones in Ho Chi Minh City that I know best. There's certainly some concepts around trying to deal with some big problems of urban drainage using digital techniques and technologies, some new and cutting edge, and some just standard, long-standing ones that require things like the digitalization of property, understands digitalization of long-standing urban infrastructure like urban drainage infrastructure. The quality of that sort of information is still in developing stages. And then, of course, they've also got some really high-tech solutions. And if anyone's been to Ho Chi Minh and noticed the growth of electric vehicles, particularly the VinFast, Vietnamese-produced vehicles, thinking about the ways that some of the bus network is being redeveloped to accommodate sort of various forms of digital technologies to try and make buses more efficient forms of transport and a more desirable form of transport in the city. And then, of course, thinking about some of the big innovation precincts that are being developed. So to try and actually construct precincts where innovative technologies and companies generating those things want to come. So there's a classic kind of growth pole model. But there's a strong attention to that, both in terms of locally developed innovations, government, private sector, and in attracting external partners for those things. So there's a sense here that there's a cohesive national through to city policy around these things, which, Vietnam's an example of a country where that's often more achievable than many others for a variety of government reasons. But that sense of a consistent mission across different tiers of government is certainly now well and truly at the forefront of thinking around urban policy as well as national economic policy. And those two things have become aligned much more strongly, and they're aligned all the way from experiments in small-scale Internet of Things production within the city, monitoring waste, monitoring water and the like, all the way up to national policy encouraging a foreign investment and the movement of foreign companies in, and everything in between. And here's a couple of examples you might look at, and I'll send you the examples here, but my colleagues and I and some others have been involved in some of these reports for Vietnamese government, for DFAT, the Australian government aid funding agency, and as well as some private sector partners like KPMG in working these sorts of projects to try and understand what's actually going on in terms of digital competencies and digital innovations for city change in Vietnam. So look, I've got a couple of readings here. I might leave this now, Daphra, if I might, and I'm happy to take any questions in the text or wait until we do our Q&A at the end.
Okay. Thank you so much, Professor Andrew, for your comprehensive presentation. And of course, as a student myself, I'm really intrigued about how these frameworks and what you have just delivered can be implemented by our government, especially on the ongoing efforts on moving one of the biggest metropolitan in the country, Jakarta, to the new city in Nusantara. But
indeed, yeah.
yes, we're going to dive deep into that later on the question and answer session.
I'm always very keen to hear a bit more about that, because I think it's a significant and generational challenge.
Yes,
really, and it's still already, as you all know, it's proven to be, it's had its stops and starts as well. So it's always going to be a very interesting challenge, like in any significant and generation long project like that, where that long-term planning idea, which we don't even do well for existing cities. So if ICANN is going to be successful, that's another challenge of long-term planning that we know we don't do well in Australia and Indonesia, and to really do that in a sense that's attuned to the sorts of changes we're seeing in transport technologies, economic movements, and community expectations of technologies happening over 10, 20 years or more.
Yes, of course. Yes, with the emerging technology, we still have lots of mystery that is currently being unsolved, but of course, we still have lots of things to discuss, and hopefully, of course, all of the materials that is going to be covered is going to be complementing our perspective into this specific material. So we're going to get back to you later again,
Thanks for
Professor
having
Andrew,
me.
on
I'll be here.
yes, on the question and answer. And for our next session, we're going to resume on to the title of the next generation series, which will be delivered by Professor Ridwan Sutriyadi. He's from the ITB School of Architecture, Planning, and Policy Development. So, for Professor Ridwan Sutriyadi, are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready.
Yes, Professor. Up you go. The mic is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. Good morning for everyone. Allow me to share my presentation, and I already sent the file of the presentation to the committee. So the idea of next generation cities come up when 2020, 2021, we're trying to cope with the new idea about IKN at that time still classified. And 2 or 3 years before, I developed a model of smart cities, which is known by 8-layer smart cities, which is trying to criticize the existing model of smart city that consider the locality of Indonesia, such as the plan and policy of Indonesia from national to local level, and then other things that the identity of Indonesia, the geographical differences of the region, the basic economic of the cities, which is varied in every cities in Indonesia, which is varied from cities in Java and outside Java. So during FORGAT at that time, we have a cooperation with Ernst & Young, Cisco, and of course with the Indonesia Association of Planner, 2020 and 2021. At the time, we are entering the COVID era. So the next generation cities is the formulation after we transform the model of 8-layer smart city, which is I developed before in 2018, into the new one after we have an input, a feedback from the millennial generation towards the IKN, the new capital cities in East Kalimantan, where at the time still classified. So here are the issues of urban development in Indonesia. This is also the points that I have been delivered to enrich the midterm development plan of the Ministry of Public Works at the time, which is show that at least there are 6 main issues related with the urban development. Namely, first one is identity and the uniqueness of the cities. The second one, governance and finance. The third one, physics and infrastructure. The fourth, economy and inequalities. Fifth, social and demographic. And last one, environment and climate change, which we also try to elaborate the next level from these 6 main issues of urban development. From identity and uniqueness, for instance, at least there are 3 main sub-themes, such as scale of urban development themes, and then city authenticity. Just like presented before, the idea of the new theme cities in Indonesia, like smart cities, become hive. So that's why this has become the consideration when we promote the idea about the issues of urban development in Indonesia into the identity and uniqueness. Other thing is that the idea of economy and inequalities. So that's why the urban or the cities in Indonesia is specific or a unique condition since it has to deal with the basic economic, where some of those are still have a relation with the main region, which is the basic economic sector, is not urban based economic sector, such as, for instance, agriculture or mining, and so on and so forth. Going to the next presentation is that at least when we're trying to search from the internet source, at least there are around 10 keywords related with the regenerative cities in Indonesia. For instance, it deals with circular economy, urban resilience, low impact development, so on and so forth. And other things, the wallpapers come from the situation in East Kalimantan, where the new capital city will be located. But this is in Balikpapan, the main cities of business areas in East Kalimantan. I also highlight about books on regenerative cities. At least there are several books related with the regenerative cities. For your information, the issue of regenerative cities or the material of regenerative cities is a part of lessons in new town planning courses. Right now, it expands from only to our two credit hours. Right now, it is expand into 6 credit hours and developed into 3 new courses. The first one is new town planning itself. The second one related with the funding of the new town development. The third one is related with the urban regeneration, especially how to cope with digital era. So the wallpaper of this slide is beside new capital cities of Indonesia, there are also the public new town near Jakarta, which is in Bogor. This is Maja, the new town of the future. While as a note, previously it has problems since before it is forest. So right now it has difficulties in finding waters, but the government's already taking care of that and become the new public new town Indonesia. The second one is the book Creating Regenerative Cities. The third one, Regenerative Cities by Design. This is the look of the new town near Bandung. This KBP, Kota Baru Parahyangan. This is the well-designed new town, and then also not only the built-up area still have other things that the green space to cope with the for instance the rain season or the climate change right now. The next is the maybe I will skip this the 10 keywords related with the next generation cities. Books related with next generation cities. Some of those are related with the smart cities. However, in those books, it's already additional discussion about how to enrich not only 6 common pillar of smart cities, but also shows about how to cope with the future, and then other things that to cope with the stakeholders, for instance, the young generations. The next one is the smart enough cities, which is talking about how to cope with the great debate related with the smart cities, not always talking about the main innovation, which is basically developed based on the technology. I think the future cities and resilient cities and also urban future. Why next gen? This is the wallpaper about the Sundanese traditional play, which is already disappear right now. So by using the literature review, I also develop the difference or components about the difference between smart cities and next generation cities. Based on the first one is competitiveness, the third one related with the objective, the third one related with the adaptivity, the fourth one how to cope with the green and circular economies, the next related with the governance, and the last one related with the ability to integrate of the emerging trends. So the next generation cities taking care of or consider 4 external factors. The first one is generation shift. Here are some of the facts, global facts, and then the study related with the World Economic Forum and the case study in the global context. Other thing is that here are some of the results which we develop or we identify when we doing the research on next generation cities 2020-2021. That shows that the young generation become important and has to be a relationship or hand in hand between young generation and old generation. Here are also the report which is recently published for the context of Indonesia, focus on the Gen Z report. It shows the identification about the characteristic of Gen Z in Indonesia, which become this discussion will become consider or external factor when we would like to develop or implement the concept of next generation cities. The second external factors of next generation cities is the impact of industry, the industrial revolution 4.0. Just like in global companies, Renault did that, Siemens doing, try to cope with the industrial revolution 4.0, Bosch also, General Electric also, and based on the cities, here are some of cases in the world. For instance, in Finland, in Belgium, in Paris, France, Ontario, Canada, and how to cope with this in Indonesia. The government, especially the Ministry of Industry, is also prepared for that. So when we try to identify the impact of industrial revolution 4.0, we also focus not only on the technological platform, but also the readiness of the infrastructure and the management of the industrial revolution 4.0, which is also come up with several important components like the policies in Indonesia, which is shows that the decentralized decisions become important. The second one, technical assistance, is also important, especially for local human resource. Information transparency and interoperability also become important. The third one consists of two things. The first one is energy transition. The second one is the circular economy. Energy transition, for instance, the case studies in Germany, in Denmark, Amsterdam, Finland, of course, and based on the foundations, for instance, the Ellen MacArthur in England. Other things here are roadmap related with the energy transition in Indonesia to 2060. So in the case of next generation city, we come up with the identification of renewable energy distribution scheme, which cannot be developed from comparison lessons learned from the US. Other things that how to cope with how to consider about the issue of investment in this idea about energy transition. The next one is cities after pandemic. This is the fourth external factor of the next generation cities. Here are the situation co-working space. One of the co-working space in Bandung. Here are the publication, global publication related with the COVID and cities after pandemic, how to cope with the city after the pandemic, just like show in the global context, like in New York, Milan, Bogota, Paris, France, Singapore, Seoul, South Korea, and here are the case studies towards IKN 2020. We come up with the idea identification, just like Ellen MacArthur idea, circular economy conceptual framework. Other things that to show the change during the COVID-19 pandemic, which is related with the several keywords like digital acceleration, work from home, health and fitness issue, education, digital community, privacy and security, and physics and psychology and behavior. So next generation cities concept, if we compare with the issue of regenerative cities, which is already emerged in the early 1970s, we try to develop this idea because next generation cities emphasizes on innovation, including technology as urban planning support system, seamless infrastructure, sustainable growth, aligning with the broader goals of regenerative urbanism, because the concept put generation shift, like the role of young generation, Gen Z, millennial, as an important variable in determining smart, sustainable, inclusive, and resilient cities in the global urban ecosystem. So the sketch shows that the right-hand side shows the regenerative cities, green cities association, but in the left-hand side shows the modern, but also there are trees for greenery, other things that the most important part about regenerative cities is related with the stakeholders, especially the generation, all the generation in the community that has to work hand in hand to promote the city more smart, sustainable, inclusive, and resilient. Here are some case studies in the global context, like in Iceland, Sierra Leone, Los Angeles, of course, in Colombia, Medellin, Durban, South Africa. And here are the concept of next generation cities that I'm talking about that come up with the study, which is done 2020-2021. So the main idea about next generation city is considering the inner factors of component like inclusive, smart, sustainable, resilient. The external factors like the fourth external factor like generation shift, industrial revolution 4.0, the impact of industrial revolution 4.0, energy and energy transition and circular economy, and city after pandemic COVID-19. These external factors will have a relationship with humans and culture, knowledge and technology, energy and matter, nature and environment, where those components, the green one, will have a relation each other and will later on formulate the next generation cities. So for your information, right now we are trying to make a detail about these ideas by writing papers based on the big data and data analytic to identify every keywords which is related of every components, whether the external components or the internal components of next generation's cities. Here are, for instance, the conclusion of the research that we've done before in 2020, 2021. For instance, there are information about millennial generation expectation about the IKN. It has to be solutive, inclusive, environmental friendly, equity has to be making more benefit for everybody, so on and so forth. So I have the presentation also shows about the global challenge related with if the next generation cities along with the regenerative cities would like to be developed and implemented in Indonesia. Indonesia have to cope with the global challenge like environmental threat, resource management, inequality, technological integration and governance. Other things in Indonesia condition, of course, there are 5 key components like limited digital infrastructure, human resource and technology readiness. We also have in recent 2 years, we also have research related with the post-mining cities. This also shows the location is near the IKN. How to transform the current basic economy into the more sustainable, regenerative, or the next generation cities. Other things, the local condition shows that budget constraints and investment is also become important issues. Other things that privacy and data security, and of course, the most important part of the regenerative cities is the stakeholders hand in hand among the generation in the idea of the community adaptation and engagement. So the main more theoretical recommendation for cities in Indonesia if they would like to promote to develop next generation cities, like invest in digital infrastructure along with the physical infrastructure, build local expertise with lifelong learning outside the formal education, secure the funding for the cities by looking for the innovative funding sources for the cities, enhance data security, and of course, continually engage with the communities. Other things with the special with the IKN, so the challenge nearly the same with the previous slides, like infrastructure development, the integration between digital and physical infrastructure, funding and investment, human resource and technology, environment and social impact, governance and policy framework. So the recommendation, at least there are 6 related with the sustainable infrastructure, diverse funding sources, how to promote the local expertise to ensure environmental conservation, engage local communities, and of course, establish a robust governance. Maybe that's all from me. I will end my presentation because this like complementary about my research roadmap research related with the smart sustainable cities, which is slowly and surely will transform into next generation cities. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much, Professor Ridwan, for your comprehensive and very interesting presentation right there. For me, myself, I do have lots of questions. This is very intrigued me, especially that when you mentioned that the infrastructure that needs to be prepared is not only physical, but also digital. So this is about maintaining the society expectation that all of the data collected by the government are to enhance the decision and policy making to its society. So the regenerative cities we can see somewhere in the future. But once again, we will be we'll be delving into that later, of course, on the question and answer session, because for right now, we'll be continuing our session, which will be delivered by Dr. Dwinita Larasati. The third topic is about participatory design for urban solution. This will complement our perspective into this topic. So, Dr. Dwinita, are you ready?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. The mic is yours.
Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. So happy to be here. So I would like to share my screen. Please bear with me. So where I'm coming from, it's written here. So my context is going to be about community participation and also more into activism in the city. So my background is product design. I'm teaching at the Faculty of Arts and Design, but outside campus, I'm also active in helping governments at the city level, national level, in setting the recommendations for usually about creative city and creative economy, but it has to do with us here. So with this opportunity, I would like to have this title, Participatory Design for Urban Solutions, and I focus to Bandung, the city we make. We make the city, and the city makes us, because the city without the citizens is not a city. So if we start about Bandung, usually it's known worldwide for the conference, Asia African Conference, that resulted in Dasa Sila Bandung, or the 10-point of declaration. But the main keywords are these in red: economy, culture, human rights, peace, international partnership. So this spirit is still being brought by Bandung generation up to today. And if you have seen the history of Bandung, it was one of the favorite cities of the colonial government because of its environment. Although it changed a lot because of the environment is also not as good as before. But we know that there are more than 120 universities and research centers in Bandung, among which at least 14 has the major of design or architecture, arts, craft, and culture. And the generations of Bandung now is, if you visit Bandung, usually it's for fashion, culinary experience, and also we have lots of hospitality business that still goes on up to today. So if you see this kind of numbers, we know that each year Bandung accepts more thousands of young people who comes and study. So they stay at least 3 to 4 years a minimum. So during their stay in Bandung, of course, they need places to stay, to hang out, places they can actualize themselves, place to be exist along with friends, and also their social media and so on. That makes them clumped into communities. They will find people with the same interest and so on. So in Bandung, that happened as well. And there was a momentum where these young people, when they gathered, they would think that the city is not providing enough for their needs. So these people are then, this is some of us. So we didn't see that the city was good enough for what we want. So Bandung didn't have to have accessible public parks. And then there's a lot of problem in the city, like a bit of rain can make a flood, there's garbage, solid waste, and so on and so on. So we just gathered and we just think that let's not wait for any facilitation from government or anyone. we can just do this ourselves. So what we did was creating what we thought is like an example or simulation, later became a solution for us in the city. And we use the knowledge that we have. Most of us came from creative background. I myself is a designer, and here this is a part of the co-founders of Bandung Creativity Forum. We have here architects, urban planners, artists, musicians, environmental activists. We have lawyers, IT people, photographers, and so on and so on. So what we did was first we have to identify ourselves. What do you want to be as a city? So because we also have people from the branding discipline, then we set this together. We know that Bandung, if we claim ourselves as a creative city, what kind of creativity do you have compared to, for example, Yogyakarta or Bali or even Bangkok and Hanoi and so on. So we have our value, vision, personality, and positioning all laid out, which then came into visualization. As you can see this .bdg as our Bandung city branding. So we then use the city as a living lab because we live here and the city keeps changing. So these are some examples of what we did to face the problem of the city. So first we did a lot of public space intervention. And here is the case, for example, for public art in the park. And we try to handle the river problem with this river cinema program. And also we want to have a bike sharing system. We call it Bike BDG. All these cases, we already proposed to the government, like, please, can we have kind of public art in the park? And they would say, oh, we don't have that kind of budget, or there's no expenses that has that title. We don't know where to put it in the city expenses and so on. So we just did it ourselves. So we just built the public art, very, very basic, but at least during the time that the public art is up, then we can show the government that actually brings positive responses and positive impacts. And we did that in 2008. And in 2010, then the government, they saw that it really works. So they arranged public money to build the public art in this area. And it developed now. So now it's already 2025. And it's now a small amphitheater there and some water fountains. We did that as well with the river, for example, the river Cikapundung that cut Bandung into parts. But so it's the biggest river, but it kept flooding because people still throw garbage in the river and so on. So this is a part of a segment of the river that is full of people at the old part of the city. We call it river cinema with inflatable screen to show independent movies from our communities. But this is located just next to the river in December. So it's a rainy season and the water flows from the river. That means if you're watching a film, then you have to get up and clean up the place, and then you can sit again until the next drizzle comes. So then, in a way, makes us realize that if only we have a cleaner river, then we can just do these fun things more pleasantly. Also, the bike sharing system, the government didn't have any plan to do that, and we wanted that. So this is a long story, but to keep it short, that finally we end up with 400 bikes for free. And then we built 12 shelters in the middle of the city that has a lot of campuses and young people around. And then we operated for a while. In this way, we show the government that if we do it by community, then we do it this way. But if we have your help or your participation as well, this can be executed in a higher scope in the city. And we also have social experiments. For example, we do experiments with our only public transport then. So those years we didn't have the online taxi yet. So we rely on this minibus, and it's very notorious because it's famous for neglecting the passengers and doing whatever they like and so on. So it's like a love-hate relationship because we have no other options unless you go to buy your own motorbike or your car. Most people cannot afford that. So we make an experiment how this public minibus can be pleasant for everybody who want to use it. So we did it twice in 2008 and again in 2013 with different kind of intervention. And also we used to have this, we still have it now, thanks to this event. We have this city forest that was about to be built into apartment and restaurants. A lot of communities protested because if that happened, then we don't have the urban forest anymore. So we protested not only by waving posters or anything. We just built this forest walk, the canopy walk. We didn't ask for any permission. We just built it. So then it happened within 9 days, and then we did a lot of intervention activities and programs around the forest to show the government that we want the forest to be there still, and then we really use the forest as a place for interaction, a place for inspiration. And we also did that with a lot of urban kampungs in Bandung, because each kampung has its own characteristics. So one can be really dense and really people living under poverty rate and so on. One village has a lot of youth, one village has a lot of active women and so on. So we have programs with them, with also listen to them, and we want to see how we can work with them together. So we have several kampungs already inactive in that sense. And also we leave footprints in sense of landmarks. For example, on the left-hand side, there's an area in Cigondewa where there are lots of manufacturers for multinational fashion brands that work there, but the environment was really under the quality of standard. So we work with the local women and with the also workers who work in the factories to see what they really want and how we can elevate the quality of life. The moral is just one thing, but then we also make cooperations with these women. And then we also, on the right-hand side, is we did this rooftop mural. So it's painted on top of about 150 houses that we have been working together since 2013 with the women groups, with the children and everything. Everyone who's there do a lot of things, not only on the physical infrastructure for children and for women. So all these prototypes of urban solutions that we did, it actually some examples. For example, one we interfere one park for a weekend, but at least the government, when we invited them, they saw that this park can be better, because design is not about explaining how things are, but it explains how things can be. So by doing this kind of prototypes, then the government would have an idea how to set the policy on them and so on. So the issue that we brought up is, for example, public space, urban mobility, green open space, festivals in kampung, city forest and heritage and so on. So after all those activities, of course, then we have to set a kind of premise so we can do better, and then we can also spread this kind of system into other cities in Indonesia. But for Bandung itself, on the left-hand side, you can see that Bandung has defined its main potentials, that we have its people, because Bandung doesn't have a nice scenery or great natural resources, but we have a lot of people, young people, and the place itself is the size is right, and these people can never be stopped with their ideas. So the sparks from these three circles says that in Bandung, if we have built environment, then it always has a business potential. And if we have innovation, it's not always about technology, but about social innovation with economic value. And our communities are active and very entrepreneurial. And what we did in the middle is we saw the city as an organic entity. So it's not different. It's no difference from human body, with the center of thinking, center of where you have to transport your waste, then lines to distribute your energy, if we have memory and so on. So by doing so, we consider what we did, the activism, as pinning the needle of creativity into this body. But if you pin it in the right place consistently and repeatedly, we can hope that the city or the whole body can be better. And that's what we did. So we do design thinking and also urban acupuncture concept in all our programs. And because Bandung joined UNESCO Creative Cities Network as a city of design, then we also have the commitment to use our creative potential to answer the SDG. And the other words here, compassion, diversity, solidarity, and so on, that's actually our keywords for to determine the 10 principles of Indonesian creative city. So after all that, we also have this framework that we should always identify the stakeholders in each program, so we can also define their roles and their contributions. And we also always do our programs in these steps: connect, collaborate, and then commerce or celebrate, because this chart is really we use it really a lot because it is easy to communicate to all stakeholders by having this kind of chart. They can see right away where they can contribute in certain projects. And to keep it going, since 2013, we have this actually it's design thinking workshop, but from all about 200 participants, 1/4 should be from the government, from the city, from the municipality staff who has the authority for budget and for programs. Because in each year, we are having this theme that is urgent for Bandung. So for example, in the first one, we have urban mobility as the theme. And then in 2014, we have identity, which is about collective identity. So if you are somebody in your environment, then what can you do there? In 2015, we have connected city. This is actually about smart city, because in that year, the government is really producing a lot of new policies and also facilitations through, for example, internet, app, and so on and so on. But not everyone is right away catching that because of the digital divide and so on. And then it went on. This is an example just to show that the result from 2013 came into reality in 2016 by the government. So they need about 2 to 3 years until the program and budget is approved, and then it can be implemented for real in the city. And we still continue this every year. And it's already recognized by UNESCO Creative Cities Network as one of the best implementation of SDG number 11. So we continued that, whether it's during the pandemic, or if the government has changed their policy and so on, because there's a term when the government didn't include the word creative city or creativity in the planning. So the city office don't have any obligation to implement this, but we went on. So during the pandemic, what we did was to draw an academic script on having our new law on creative economy, with the hope that whoever becomes mayor would have to implement the creative city and creative economy programs. And we had the law passed in 2021. So that's our small winning to continue this kind of activities. And here recently, this year, we have another theme, resiliency, because of the issue of the Lembang, I forgot about fault, Lembang fault. The news media, they always warn us about this possible disaster, but then the way they do it is like fear mongering. So people are tired of getting scared, like, oh, we're gonna die soon if the earthquake happen. So they're fed that kind of news so often that they become apathetic. So we are trying to return these issues back to the community by not in the way, not in the scaring them, but to prepare them for the disaster, because but not in a scary way, because otherwise they won't. So lastly, because we are now already a part of the UNESCO network, and we also have Indonesia Creative Cities Network that we can share our framework with. We always look back into these references wherever we want to make any program. So SDG, but implemented in the local scale. That is the new urban agenda, which has these keywords: inclusion, integration, and innovation. And we also refer to the UNESCO publication in 2016. If we talk about cities, human-centered cities, they have this book, Culture, Urban Future, that has this keyword that we can implement also as well. Human-oriented cities, sustainable economy, human-scale cities, and so on. And this is my notes from the Smart City Expo in Jaipur 2018, because that was the first Smart City Expo that was held not in advanced industrial countries. So they also have these issues about if we do a lot of smart that has to do with advanced technology, there is also some gaps. So they here redefine what is smart for our situation, for our context. And this we also have to keep in mind. And another one is this, if you heard about Dutch Design Week, one of the co-founders, she's a trend forecaster, not about fashion trend, but about a lifestyle trend, that actually nowadays, this is what happens if we talk about people, community, citizens, and its impact to the urban area. So we know that this industrial revolution has changed, population has changed. So acceleration of technology is also required, and there should be interconnectivity all the time. And then this donut economics that came out in 2017, we also know that economy is no longer measured only from GDP, but there are some other quality that we can refer to. And there's also the shift in the Maslow diagram, not only about basic needs as in food, clothing, and shelter, but also this connectivity through internet and so on. And the post-industrial creativity shows us that cities are inclined to become villages, and also villages would incline to be cities in not only in the physical sense, but also in the facilities and so on. And we have the generation that no longer choose to do freelancing, but work in collaboration, although in their own spaces and so on. So the question is, who owns the city in this sense? The city we make is the future we create. I end my presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Dwi Nita, for your comprehensive and interesting presentation. Just a quick remarks that I myself originally not from this city, Doctor. I'm from South Sumatra, and one of the things that magnetized me to be schooled in Institute Teknologi Bandung it is because it is located in Bandung. And one of the things that I heard about Bandung, it is one of the most visually aesthetic city in Indonesia. So it is very exciting that in this very afternoon, I can witness the presentation from one of the people, one of the person that are the man behind the gun, the one that is shaping how Bandung is presented right now. So once again, thank you so much, Dr. Dwi Nita, for your devotion to this city. We certainly wanted to hear more about that from you later on the question and answer session. But for right now, we are going to resume our session to the fourth and final session, which will be delivered by Dr. Raden Aswin Rahadi from the School of Business and Management. He's going to deliver the topic titled Regenerative Cities, Economic Model and Financial Strategies for Sustainable Urban Growth. So, Dr. Raden Aswin Rahadi, you ready?
Okay, hello. Thank you.
The mic is yours.
Yeah, the sound is clear. Yeah. Okay, so let me share my screen here. Just a minute. Okay. So I will make it concise and quick, yeah, so later on, because we will have a better discussion later on during the Q&A session, yeah, in time, yeah. So Hello everyone, my name is Medan Nasara Hadi. I'm an assistant professor here on School of Business and Management, Institut Teknologi Bandung. I'm from the Business Risk and Finance Interest Group here. So here, my take will be on the regenerative cities, economic models, and financial strategies for sustainable urban growth. And this is the idea that we try to bring in here. Yeah. So here will be the highlight here from the point of view of economics and finance. Yeah, we have an urban challenge that we are facing now. As we know, we have resource depletion that we are facing right now. Yeah, we are relying too much on oil and fossil fuel, and then we have a limited supply on land, those kinds of things that we are now facing because the population keep going up. Yeah, and then we also have an environmental degradation. Yeah, well, because of the highly mining and those kinds of things that makes the city and overall world become less and less better to live on that part there. And also we have an inequality gap there, where not just about the gender, but also about the people from Western area to from southern area part of the world, particularly the one in the northern part of the world, those kind of things. So those are two the urban challenge that we are facing. So the idea of the genetic fitting will be the way to bring this gap to closer. So a pathway for sustainability, resilience, and also inclusivity. Yeah. So the idea of this presentation will be to explore some examples and then maybe some ideas on economics and financial strategies for regenerative cities. Yeah. So I bring this out because it's also related with the previous studies that are being done by Ahmad and also by Sibel Ali, that says that now because we are overwhelming on doing the natural resources on activating on that part, and also we have issues on financial that will lead human well-being to balance, and one of the ways to cater that will be to face on the green innovations and also to become to work together all people around the world. Yeah. And then the economic degradation itself is also like it or not is ironically become the sub effect of what we have, because we are looking for economic growth, we are always looking for innovation and technology, we are doing globalizations, we are exploring the natural resources, and then right now during the time like it or not during the transitions, even renewable economic consumptions also makes the environmental degraded on that part there. So going on that part, so we try to explore what are really the regenerative cities that we are looking for on this part. Yeah. So the idea will be it will be the cities that are designed to restore and enhance the natural ecosystems. Yeah. So we try to live better life. Yeah. We, as you know, maybe if you are living in Jakarta, if you are living in Bandung just now, you are being faced with a lot of traffic. Even if in Bandung, the last few weeks, there will be heavy flooding, heavy torrent flooding. You talk about Bojong Soang, you talk about the Kolot, you talk about those areas. Even Bekasi just now, they have suffered a lot of natural disaster due to the we can call it because of the wrong ecosystem that are being done. I think just now also Professor just now mentioned about because Tika Pundung is having a problem also because people keep dropping their garbage there, so the river becomes flooded in that part. So that's one of the ways we want to restore that part. That is the idea of the regenerative cities. And then from the point of view of finance economy, it will try to incorporate the circular economics. It will have the idea of renewable energy, and then it's always about the commodities and things. I give you an example, maybe Freiburg in Germany here in this part. So Freiburg has an idea of a green city Freiburg in here. So one of the ways that they are doing, one of the ideas is that they will have a very good waste collections and waste disposal system that makes the city become much more greener, much more better. And then one of the ideas that is actually interesting will be about the Freiburg Cup, where during the time on this part, people here, if you go to every kind of coffee shop, because we are addicted to coffee, everyone is likely to go to coffee, drinking those kinds of things. They use the same brand of cup, so what happens if you use the one cup and then it just dispose it, and then that cup can be reused again in other stores. Yeah. So everyone will not be using different kinds of brand and everything, but they use the similar cup. So this is one of the ideas that actually quite not that big on the action, but on the applications, but it has a lot of impact there because during the time everyone is actually trying to do waste management and waste collection from that market. So that's one of the good things that happening in here. And the idea of the economic part will be about how to get a model to support the regeneration. Yeah. So one of the highlights will be in here will be about the circular economy. Yeah. So just now I give you the example of Freeburg. Freeburg will be about the recycling and reducing waste. Yeah. So from that part, it's actually the application will be there. Directly consumed. But outside of that, we can also talk about the private-public partnership. Yeah, we get the idea just now. I think Prof. also mentions about difficulties from the government to have a funding on doing all of this kind of thing. Even IKN just now, yeah, we have issues here because we try to develop a new sustainable cities that is actually try to lift the weight of Jakarta, but now we are faced with a budget problem here. So by collaborating with the public, collaborating with the private, disposing some kind of a green bond, some kind of those kind of financing, collaborating with the private companies that can help to overcome these kinds of issues. Yeah, So collaborating for the open project will be one way to go. Yeah, from the point of view of finance and economics. Yeah, and also we can also bring the ideas of green bonds and financing environmental benefits by giving, for example, okay, you use this bond, you buy this bonds, we'll give you some kind of benefits from the point of view of tax. Now we also talk about the carbon trading and those kinds of things. So we have a lot of things that actually can be explored here for the economic models to support the regenerations of the city. So that is actually some of the good things that we can think of that might be able to support the idea that about the regenerative cities. Yeah, this part. Yeah. I bring you another case. Yeah, here about Amsterdam. Amsterdam is actually quite successful on doing the circular economy because they have the objective. Yeah, here they want to use the half of resources. Yeah. So that means that they are the half of excavation. They will be half of using natural resources used by 2030, and then by that actually they can reduce the cost, and to be honest, they can create jobs here. So quite interesting idea that they are bringing in here. So what will be the highlight on that part? We try to explore that in here. So the strategy are involved. They will focus on these three whole things here. One will be the food and organic waste streams here. So their first ambitions will be they will have a short supply chain for the foods, yeah. So to provide a robust, sustainable food system. That means that all of the food that are being delivered to Amsterdam is actually come from nearby. So if you're talking about, in Bandung, you're talking about Indonesia, so there will be no more foods coming from Bandung, from Sulawesi, or maybe from, Papua, those kind of things, yeah. It's better to have it right near the city, yeah. So because of that, and then you will have a short distance of travel, you will reduce your emission of carbon, and also you can come up with a job creation for that part. Yeah, and then make sure that the foods and every kind of sources are healthy and sustainable for the people on the outside. And then from that part, all of the foods that are being directed will be highly quality processed. Yeah, so they make sure that the organic waste then will not be just now, example of being dumped in Sungai Cikapundung like that. Yeah, so it's better to have a good system to make sure that the food and organic waste will be processed well. And then also from the consumer goods, yeah, this is have the right example by reducing the consumption. Yeah, now we hear from younger generations. Before that, we heard about FOMO, right? Sorry, YOLO, that time, YOLO. You only live once. Like that. Now, the notes will be like YOLO. Like everyone talks about YOLO. So you only need one. Yeah, that will be the highlight. Because now, so I think that's also the feeling of people in Amsterdam. Yeah. So by having, you don't have to have like 2 cars. You don't have to have like so many gadgets. You don't have to those kinds of things. That will be one of the ways to go. And then you have to, at least you have sparingly. That means that you try to reuse the thing that is actually there. You try to reuse the furniture. You are trying to reuse the things that actually still work. Maybe you kind of alternate, but and try to upgrade it or try to revamp that into something others that useful. Yeah. And then they try to mix most of the discarded products or anything that is discarded is being used again to become like art, to become like other tools or kinds of things. And that will be the idea of the kind of. And then lastly, for the built environment will be they try to translate it to the circular development, and then it will require a joint effort. So that means that they will try to grab all of the stakeholders. I think just now Peter also mentioned about the stakeholders that we have to deal with. So work together with them, and then try to formulate the right circular criteria, and then that circular criteria will be placed into the existing city. That means that, from example, in the built environment, so they will work together to make sure that you don't have to demolish a building. Yeah. Maybe you can try to reuse that building to function as something else. Yeah. So you don't have to, build new things. You don't have to be skyscrapers, those kinds of things. Yeah. This is the three things that exactly Amsterdam is doing, and actually it comes up with a good result. Yeah. Yeah. From the point of view. Yeah. So there will be some minuses on this one, because on the right hand, the orange one will be worsened, but that is actually not related with the finance and economics. But looking at the point of view of economics in here, work and income. So the average standard income is increasing. The long-term unemployment is going down. So the employment opportunities is going up, and people can afford better here. So this is actually the real case that is happening in Amsterdam, comparing from just 5 years difference. Yeah. So we should be optimistic on this part. We can see that there will be the future that is actually everyone keeps talking about being regenerative, being green, those kinds of things is actually cost you more. Yes, of course that will be on the beginning, but if you look at the first case of Rotterdam, even after 5 years, the result is actually quite significant. Yeah, so we should learn from that, and then we try to explore that into the application in real life. Yeah. So from the financial point of strategy, so what should we do? Yeah. So we try to look at the literature, and then try to look from the best application that are happening. So actually, one of the ways to incentivize people will be to have a policy incentive, yeah, to subsidize the one that are going there, and then we give a tax break to one who are implementing them. Yeah. And then after that, you go for innovative financing. Yeah, you cannot rely on the government because government also have their own problems. Yeah. So you do crowdfunding, you do commodity financing. I think just now, again, the example from Profido and from Profita also mentioned about, okay, I will do it myself, and then actually it happens there. So exactly this is the way to go, yeah, to support the whole things, yeah. And then lastly, I think the capacity building, yeah. So maybe from the point of view from policymakers and everything, they look only from the point of view, okay, if I do this, the cost will be big at the beginning. But they need to be educated, they need to be taught, they need to be convinced that they have to have a better financial literacy. Yeah, all of these policymakers, yeah, to say that, okay, this is the only world that we have. This is the only city that we have. Yeah, and then if you neglect this, yeah, there will be no room, not for you, but for your grandchildren. So you better, pick up, you better, check, touch the grass. Yeah, if you're talking about the young generation, they say touch the grass, and then come to realization that there will be no other way to go unless unless you go for sustainability. So you have to convince them. We have to literate them. We have to teach the policymakers. We have to teach the government. We have to teach these people to make sure that this is the only world that we have. This is the only city that we have. And then if you keep doing this, then there will be no future for us. Yeah. Okay. And then that will come with the challenge and opportunities, because at the beginning, of course it will be with a high cost. Yeah. You implement the system and everything, you have to come up with the high cost, and there will be some because due to the lack of literacy, they will have the regulatory gaps on that part. Yeah. because the policy is not there. And then sometimes people tend to have a problem to change because in Vietnam, people keep throwing garbage outside, the butt of cigarette, they just put it at bed, and then those kinds of things. We need to educate them also. Yeah. But however, there will be opportunities. We have new technologies, how to process waste better. Yeah. And then now people get better on. I think the awareness, especially after they feel the impact on just now the Bekasi and then also the Dayakolot and then also the Bojong Soang and those areas in Bandung. Yeah. So if people are really okay, I need to do something because if not, then I will be flooded again in next year. Yeah. So everyone will be why not? And then of course, like now we are like we having like now with the MIT. Yeah. So we will have an international cooperations. We are globalized. We are globalized much better. So we can ask for help. Yeah, we can ask for help. We can ask for direction for the one that is actually already successful on doing uh, regenerative cities. Yeah. Okay. Last to recap. So this is what we have for yeah. So regenerative city will be combining sustainability, resilience, and inclusivity, and these all three must be there to make sure that the process will be applicable. And then this will call for action for all of the stakeholders. We need to have a collaboration among academics. Yeah, we have to collaborate. We have to literate. We have to educate the policymakers, and then we also have to talk with practitioners, and then also to the private sector to discuss about points of collaboration and points of cooperation that we can have with them. And then I'm ending my presentation with a closing statement. Together, I think we can finance the future and create a thriving cities in harmony with the nature. Then that's all. But thank you. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Aswin, for your presentation. Very straightforward, very compact, and very thoughtful. There is a very striking moment when you say about the call to action, where it is all of this collaboration. We can only have the things that we want to have, like Dr. Dwinita previously mentioned. We know about triple helix, pentahelix, hexahelix. So this is a collaborations. This is not one or only two party to be. This is a very collaborative efforts. Now, up next, ladies and gentlemen, we will have to move to our question and answer session. So this is going to be your opportunity to engage with our speakers. So we will have around 3 questions for now, but we are going to prioritize any questions that is delivered directly. So please open your microphone and your camera so we know who you are, what you're asking, and you can engage directly to the speaker. So ladies and gentlemen, please, any questions? Yes, Mesa Natadenta, please. You may introduce yourself and your question. We can't hear you. You're inaudible. Sorry, we're still unable to hear you.
Akdafa, I think Mercer has also put some in the chat that relate to education and capacity building, which I'm not sure I'm the best place to answer, but we can just read those and have a go.
Yes, Professor, I believe maybe Mr. Mesa have a technical issue, so I will help to read that for you, okay? So there are 2 questions. What do you think is the right framework for educating people, especially in Indonesia, on regenerative city through an educative tech platform? What should be the first step to ensure both awareness and engagement at scale? Once awareness is established, how can we effectively influence clients and developers to adopt and implement sustainable building practices? What strategies works best to turn education into a real-world action? So, yes, we have received the question. To which speaker is this question is intended to, Mr. Mesa? So, Dr. Aswin, so please, Dr. Aswin, the mic is
Okay.
yours.
Okay, thank you. So I think let's try to answer this. This is quite tough question because I know if 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 we already have the solutions, then and it's the problem will be not here anymore. Yeah, but I'm thinking maybe like this. Yeah, I'm thinking like this. This is maybe applicable for from my point of view, my experience as a Indonesian people. Yeah, so I don't know. Maybe it might be different compare if it is applied from our colleagues and professors and in Australia. Yeah, but what I'm thinking of maybe like this. Yeah, we have to start small. We have to start small, and then from my point of view, that should have a direct impact for them. Yeah. So, because what I'm learning from the people of Indonesia is that, they tend not to listen, but they tend to act up when they feel like it. Yeah. So, my point of view will be like if, for example, like they can have like we have like a small example on waste management, and then after that their environment become much more cleaner, much more better. Yeah. I think that can be replicated easily in the future. Yeah. So I'm not a big fan, on poster, on to be honest again, yeah, on webinars, those kinds of things, yeah, to build the awareness of the people, because for the people of Indonesia, they have to act. So their love language will be on act. Yeah. So I think that's the way to go. Yeah. So